Have you ever thought about starting a podcast with your boo, your BFF, your sibling,
your main squeeze, your poochies, your gordito rico,
your mom, your dad, your grandpa, your puppy,
your sweetheart,
your bae, your schnookums, your sugar snap pea?
el amorcito rico?
Well, in this episode, we're going to tell you why it's a great idea. We're going to give you some best practices, but we're also going to tell you what to beware of. And we're starting right now.
And as I am the soldier and poet. Yes, tell this to all the world.
Hello and welcome to the Pod Sound School podcast, the podcast that gets into the lifestyle of podcasters. My name is Veronica.
And I'm Studio Steve, and we're here to help you crank up that volume knob on your online content. And like Veronica mentioned, we're all about podcasting here. We really make this podcast for podcasters, for newbie podcasters, but really for people who have been at the game for a while.
Yeah, we give you a little bit of an insight into the industry, some of the latest tools and things that can help you with your productivity. We also talk about funny things that happen in podcasting or in being a podcaster.
And we answer a lot of your questions. We do a lot of search listening, so we know what people are asking around the topics of podcasting. We try to answer those questions too. And one of the questions, the question of this episode, is podcasting with your significant other.
Podcasting with your significant other. And that's becoming something that a lot of people, a lot of couples are doing. Not only podcasting, but getting into business together. I read an article the other day talking about how, because of the pandemic, a lot of people are working with their significant others and building businesses and new projects and exciting things.
And in case you've been listening for a while and you've been wondering, Veronica and I, we're a hot item.
Yes. I don't know if we're a hot item, but we're together.
She's my boo.
Yeah.
And I'm her
gordito rico.
I'm her schnookums.
But before we get into the information, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Some of you have been listening to our podcast for 2.5 years since we started the Pod Sound School. We want to express our gratitude to you. Thank you for being part of this journey. And for those of you who are new, welcome. If you haven't reviewed our podcast, I would appreciate it. And Studio Steve would appreciate it if you take some time to review our podcast and to share our podcast with other podcasters or other people who may be interested in starting a podcast or want to start something in content creation.
All right, great. So let's go ahead and get into the meat of the episode. First, really quickly, I thought we would start by talking a little bit about our own story, really just a couple paragraphs, if we can keep it to that. And then we'll get into 3 parts of this episode. The first is going to be why it's a great idea to start with your BFF or your significant other, and then some best practices, and then the pros and cons, or what you should be aware of. And if you stick until the end of the episode, you'll actually get to hear some heart-to-heart, back and forth, real drama between Veronica and I, and some of the struggles that we might have. The passion. Some of the struggles we have. I know we seem like it's all fun and games, and we're constantly laughing, and I seem like a really down-to-earth and, practical and calm person, I'm sure. But stick around till the end, and you might hear different than that.
You'll find out.
So first off, our story. We created the Pod Sound School after we were deeply unsatisfied with our careers. My career was in film production, and before that it was in musical production. Very underpaid for the amount of work I was doing. 14 hours on set holding a boom mic, getting $150 a day, or getting only a few $100s a day, 14-hour days working on long studio projects, and never really getting any appreciation or really the real validation I wanted. And so it was an easy shift for me to get into this. What about for you?
So I graduated from law school, and the whole idea of me going to law school was because I wanted to be a prosecutor. So I started working in that field, and I found it to be something that was killing my soul inside. I was losing faith for humanity. I would come home depressed. And so I switched to corporate law, and I was working doing that type of work, isolated in my cubicle, not having contact with any other people besides my cubicle neighbor, my coworker.
Your OCD
my
cubicle
my
neighbors.
OCD, he was even more weird than me. So then I just found myself in doing this very unfulfilling work and trying to find a way to escape from that. So that's why when you told me about the Pod Sound School and to come in and build something with you, I was on board. I was totally on board with doing it.
And you're ready to take the risk.
I was ready to take
You
the
were
risk.
listening to a lot of Kathy Heller at the time.
I was listening to a lot of
Don't Keep Your
Kathy
Day
Heller,
Job.
Don't Keep Your Day Job.
And a bunch of other podcasts at the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so we took the leap of faith. We ate every bit of our savings up, all while raising a family and managing to still like each other, at least a little bit. We co-host our podcast. We make videos together. We produce and manage clients' podcasts. And we also have 3 amazing online courses that we've put together for
Oh, I
Podskis.
thought you were going to say 3 amazing kids.
Oh, no. The kids, they're not that amazing.
They're not amazing.
Well, they are. They're amazing because they're little Veronicas. They're like these mutant, like mini versions of Veronica.
They are. They are.
Yeah, they're horrible
They're
little
mini-me.
horrible little monsters though, but they're very cute. For sure. So we've been through a lot of ups and downs with our podcast and our business, and that's really why we decided to make this podcast episode and to record this, is just to kind of talk about that and to encourage you to just go ahead and do it.
Yeah, because you're about to embark in a journey of a lifetime here.
Yes. And it really does help to quit your 9 to 5. So even if you're kind of considering starting a side hustle with your boo, with your hubby, with your boyfriend, with your brother or your best friend, starting a podcast can be a really good entry point for that. It's where you can sort of test the waters and start to build your brand and gradually build a business together.
Not to mention that there's a lot of podcasts out there from couples that are doing really well.
Yeah.
Marriage and Martinis is one that comes up right now. Yeah. And something that we forgot to mention is that we are recording here in our patio porch
Oh, yeah.
here in our home in North Carolina. So that's why you're listening to the beautiful sounds of nature. Some workers too, because
Yeah.
we have construction.
On the one day that we decided to record outside, we wanted this to kind of be a date style thing between the two of us.
Yeah, listening to the sounds of nature, but you may hear some
Yelling and some saws and some hammerings and things like that.
Yeah, cursing in Spanish too.
Yeah,
because I think they're Hispanics.
Yeah, or Veronica will be cursing
Yeah,
in Spanish because she
in
does that as well
Ay,
too.
Santa Maria Bendita.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump into number 1.
Why it's a great idea.
Why it's a great idea to podcast with your boo or somebody you're really close to. The first is that it will bring more skills to the table.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you think about that?
Definitely. I think that has been part of our success, is that we both have different backgrounds and we both bring different skills, a set of skills to the table. Like with you, all of your technical experience in audio and video and graphic design. And
And with you, with all of your research and your
with all my
writing,
research and
your
writing.
organization, and all of that stuff, your professionalism. And so we really balance each other out that way and bring both of those skills. I think that's why so many people have such great luck with co-hosts.
Yes, yeah. So it's been key for us to grow fast. And at the very beginning, we were very quick to pinpoint those things that we were good at and those things that we were not good at. So, for example, I have no idea about editing, and I have no idea about editing video or composition and all that, all that stuff. That's why you come into place and do those things.
Yeah.
And you're not very good at copywriting, or you're not very good at writing at all. Like everything happens in your head and it stays in your head, and then you vocalize, but you don't write anything.
I also never take action. So
But we're not there yet.
Yeah. And actually, I still struggle with that. So it's really nice to have you on board that way, to just be like, okay, action. Is this going to bring something to the table? What's going to happen here? So
Yeah.
different personality type. Now, a word of caution will come with this when we get to the last part of the episode. The other reason it's a great idea is
Time, scheduling, and flexibility.
Yeah, so when you are working with somebody who lives with you, somebody who has the same schedule as you,
Yes.
that can be very, very good for you and for your efficiency because, that person is there with you and they can record your own schedule. It's not like you have to, when you are hosting a podcast with another person who happens to have a family and a different schedule and all that, so that can be like some conflicting schedules. But when you are podcasting with somebody who's in your family living with you, that's an advantage.
Yeah, definitely an advantage. And you touched on the other reason it's a good idea, and that's
Same location.
Yeah, same location.
if that is something that you happen to share
Yeah, and
with
I know
this
that there's a
person.
lot of tools out there that, Riverside, Squadcast, and all those fun tools that you can use to connect remotely. They don't replace to be in the same space,
In the same
face to
location.
face, in the same location, using very nice microphones.
Yes. And the other reason it's a good idea is because you can divide the tasks and you can divide the needed education. So there's a lot of education that comes with podcasting.
Yeah.
And even with my background as an audio engineer, that gave me a huge advantage and definitely was part of the reason we thought it was a good idea to get into this. But I wasn't educated in podcasting. It's a totally different thing. I had no idea what an RSS feed was. I didn't know how to host a podcast. I didn't know about any of that stuff. And I also most definitely didn't know about market research or any of the stuff that we've had to educate ourselves on. And so, yes, it's really cool that you can divvy up or you can delegate the tasks.
Yeah, I would say on that, just make sure that you're even, because then the other person is going to start to resent you if they do more than you,
Yeah.
or if you do more than them, then you feel like you're carrying the whole thing. You don't feel the support of the other person,
Yes.
so make sure that they're divided, and that also something that has helped me a lot, because I feel sometimes that Steven carries a lot of weight because he does a lot of the technical and things that you guys don't see and can be very stressful, is to try to be a help and try to help as much as you can, even with the small things.
Or the things you don't understand.
Or the things you don't understand,
And
yeah.
we're going to get to that as we get to the second part of this episode, which is best practices. And we're going to get into that next. But finally, the last thing is you just achieve your goals faster because you have the similar goals. And chances are, if you've been with your boo for a while, you've overcome some things in your relationship. And so you can use that same communication power you have and that same closeness you have to skip a lot of the BS that you'd otherwise have to get through with a co-host that maybe you don't know so well, or with interviewing people, having an interview style podcast where you interview different people every week, or just running the whole show by yourself. So it could be really a game changer to
Yeah.
podcast with your boo.
Yeah, if you are a solo podcaster, if you're not podcasting with anybody, you have to do it all by yourself. It's really, really hard.
And the other thing is, just because we're saying podcast with your boo and you hear Veronica and I talking to each other, you can podcast with your boo without both of you being the talent in front of the microphone. Your partner could be the behind the scenes person. They could be the editor, the social media manager. It could be a business that you start together. And that brings us to
Number 2.
best practices.
That's the sound of the machine.
That's the sound of the machines. Best practices. Don't record when there's construction going on. So, best practices, this is my number one. Veronica tells all of our students and clients this all of the time in our Podskis on YouTube. And you've probably heard her say this on our podcast before too, and that's to treat your podcast like a business. So if you decide to podcast with your boo, even if you're just doing it for fun, maybe it's something you think will bring you closer together, will give you a hobby to do together instead of maybe going to restaurants or getting drunk on the weekends or whatever it is, right? So it's going to be something a little more
Or
productive.
watching Netflix.
Or watching Netflix. Maybe you just want to get around and talk about your favorite Netflix shows. Even if you're going to do that and you're strictly looking at it as a hobby, still treat it like a business. If you treat it like a business, the main thing that you're going to avoid is pod fading.
Yes. And definitely when you are podcasting with your family member, significant other, BFF, this is a very, very important thing to do, because if you treat your podcast as a business, then you're going to set boundaries. You're going to have schedules. You're going to have certain tasks that need to be done. And then the personal relationship is going to be apart from what you guys are doing, which is this project and or a business. So when those things are not clear from the beginning and roles are not clear from the beginning and schedules are not clear from the beginning, that's when you get into issues, disagreements, fights,
Secret resentments.
and
ultimately pod
he's
fading.
keeping me awake until way too late talking about the next project and the next podcast episode. You know, she's waking up too early to plan and do things I have no idea about. So, yeah, make sure that you treat your podcast like a business and schedule meetings and plan your content.
Yes.
And delegate.
Yes. And all of this was really great. And it basically touched on all of the best practices. And the first one was to treat it like a business. And then really that is the best practice, because underneath that you have schedule meetings, but especially have discussions beforehand and delegate responsibilities and set expectations. So you do this, I do this. You're in charge of social media, which means if I'm going to be learning how podcast editing works, and I'm actually going to take a course how to become a podcast editor, and you're going to
With the pod sounds cool.
Oh yeah, and my Reaper for Podcasters course is a really good course for that. And you're going to take a social media course, how Instagram works, or how I can marketing, or how branding works, or something like that. Then we both want to be putting in an equal amount of work, and we have certain expectations we want to see from that each other. And then you have meetings every so often so that you can touch base on, hey, how's this going? And then open communication, and find a way to separate your personal life from your business life or your podcast life, if at all possible. And that can really help you not to run into any problems. The idea here is to nourish your relationship rather than hurt it or put a strain on it. And what I love most about podcasting with your boo, and what I've personally loved so much with podcasting and doing this content creation with Veronica, is it really does force me to look at my own personal personality flaws, my temper and the hot temper I get when I'm kind of putting together equipment and things like that, or how uptight my perfectionism, all of that stuff in our everyday relationship. Had we not decided to work together, I don't think I would have been forced to face. Also, when you compare that to just being a solo podcaster, it's the same thing. And it's something I'm always encouraging people about starting a podcast. It's because it really does force you to face some of your demons. And the degree to which your podcast will become successful is almost equal to the degree to which you are willing to face those demons and overcome them and become a better person. Because as you become a better person, and as your relationship becomes a better relationship, your brand and your business and your message and your purpose all become better, more enriched, and are going to reach more people.
Yeah.
So that concludes the best practices. And now we're going to move on to the section you've been waiting for. I don't have any subpoints.
I have another best practice.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yes. So one of the things that I wanted to mention is that just make sure that you allow the other person to be and allow the other person to shine. If you tend to be a little bit of the dominant, controlling person, then just make sure that you tone that down a little. Podcasting isn't easy at the beginning. It's still not easy for us. Getting in front of the microphone. So if you tend to hug the microphone, to be very opinionated, and we don't hear about the other person, we don't hear the other voice as much as yours, just make sure that you allowed that person, that you give the stage to that person to express himself or herself and just be. Because in that process of you podcasting, and that is just so intimate and such a hard way to explain when you, because how often do you sit down and you talk, especially with couples, or if you're doing this with any family member, and now you have an excuse, we need to record a podcast about this. So make sure that you are not the only one talking, that you shut up and listen.
Yes.
And you're going to learn so much about the other person, and you're going to learn so much about you. And things will come up.
Yeah, and
even if your podcast is not about marriage issues and family issues, a lot of things will come up that will surprise you from your partner that are so wonderful, and
Yeah, no, that was great. And I think also what you touched on was just overall good best practices that I've heard you say before in our episodes as well too, and that we've talked about. And as podcasting isn't about talking as much as it is about listening, especially when you're looking at like interview podcasts, but co-host podcasts. If you don't really listen, then it starts as maybe just about talking. But listening is like search listening, social listening, listening to your audience, listening to your listeners, observing, becoming a better listener is going to make you a better podcaster and a better mate. A better boo. A better schnookums.
So I have somebody the other day reaching out on Instagram, and this person called me mate.
Oh, yeah. That's
Mate.
an Australian thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so now, the moment that you've all been waiting for, and I don't have any sub-points
Los
under this
chismes.
big point, but these are the Los
Chismes.
the bewares, and the pros and cons. Well, really, it's just the cons, because we've already talked about the pros a lot. So the cons are that...
Oh, boy.
Well, the cons... Let me phrase it like this. What do you like least about working with me?
Well, let's talk about... I'm going to talk about in general,
Okay.
and then I'll talk about our particular scenario.
Okay, that sounds good.
Because I think generally, if there are some personality traits that you don't like about your significant other in the day-to-day, they will not miraculously disappear when you start podcasting. In fact,
They'll become amplified.
they'll amplified and new ones will come up. So something that I recommend for that is just to have a lot of communication, to talk a lot about, be open about the thing. Hey, you make me nervous. You make me agitated. You're bringing this energy I don't like, and I don't think our listeners will like this energy that you're bringing into the studio. Let's just breathe and pause for a minute. You need to take a break, or any of those things. I think one of the things that have been difficult to deal with sometimes is the
What are your real frustrations?
okay, so how inadequate sometimes you make me feel,
Ooh.
because you have knowledge that I don't have, and it seems like you do a lot with setting things up, setting the cameras, setting the microphones, and making sure that all the technical goes well for our videos, for when we're recording audio, when we're going live. Then I'm just sitting there, and you get very agitated. You start doing the heavy breathing
And the face rubbing.
and the face rubbing. And
I used to do the boop,
and the sweat, and
Yep.
the boo boo, and the sweat, dripping down the forehead, and
Almost like an enraged,
Yes.
maniacal.
maniacal, and then you get like very like jumpy moves, and things fall, and then it doesn't help that you are a little disorganized too, so you're like running up and down the stairs trying to find things I don't even know how they look like, and you ask me and I have no idea where they are. So I'm just sitting there feeling very nervous, inadequate, and like I'm in trouble. Just moments before we go live, or moments before we start recording.
Yeah, which
and
is
then
horrible.
somehow I just have to like shake it off,
Flip the switch.
flip the switch, and perform. That has been difficult.
It's been very trying too. But I would say that it has given us the opportunity to have a lot of difficult conversations that maybe we wouldn't have had otherwise. Because if it wasn't for us being in front of these recording devices, we probably just would have swept that shit under the rug and not talked about it.
Yeah.
So
and listen, I see the amount of work that you do, and I see the amount of work that requires to have all this going at the same time, and I know that it's very stressful, but I think that's something that we need to work on more, for you to be able to vocalize what's my role, how can I help you, and maybe be more prepared, so we avoid putting ourselves in that uncomfortable situation when you are running around and sweating, and me just sitting there.
And actually, that is something that we have now put into better practice, which for anybody who finds themselves in that situation, where maybe one person tends to get a little stressed when they're setting up gear, or right before a live stream, or right when you press the record button and the words aren't coming out right, it gets stressful. And because you're close to your significant other, you tend to be more of an asshole around the people we love the most for whatever reason. And so
And I think I read somewhere it's because you feel safe.
You feel safe, right? You feel safe to be yourself around them.
To let those emotions out.
Something that's really helpful in that situation is to breathe, obviously, and that's something I've been working on a lot, and it's helping tremendously with my antsiness and the anxiety and the overwhelm I get. Sometimes I have these nightmares sometimes about cables and being wrapped in cables like spaghetti, but the breathing really helps. And the other thing that helps is to talk about it beforehand, to have a game plan. This also helps, like in any situation where people may have anxiety or may feel a little uncomfortable. It's like, this is what we're going to do. And when it happens that I'm feeling this way, we're going to take a breath and we're going to do this instead. So what we've been doing recently that really helps a lot is I kind of set up privately beforehand. Once I'm all set up, then I take a break, then I take a breath, and then Veronica is invited into whatever studio space is. And that helps a lot. Yeah. And it's been a long time, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, since we've had any big freakouts like and full-on mental breakdowns. Right.
So something I was gonna say about that is that I don't want you to forget, even though you are creating content with your significant other, you tend to forget that you are doing this for an audience. What has helped me to to flip the switch, like you said, is to think, okay, this isn't for me, and I'm not gonna make it about me, and I'm not gonna get offended and impede the work that I've been doing. Up until that point, we've been researching, writing, and all that. And for me to respond to your behavior and freak out to and storm out of the the studio and not do the things that we should do, it would be counterproductive. Yeah. Something that has helped me is to be like, okay, we're not doing this for ourselves. We're doing this. We have an audience and we have a responsibility to show up.
And something that you were doing
So don't forget about that. Leave all your negativity and your bad juju and your fights. And in that moment, just make it about your audience, and that will help. With that being said, when it's over, then you can address those things so you guys can
That's what I was going to say.
Better.
I remember from the very beginning, you would say, I remember it's when we would do these pod bits where it was just tremendous amount of technical setup, and I would make things so much harder than they have to be because I have these insane ideas. And you were very good at saying, okay, we need to talk about this later. So we scheduled a meeting to personally talk about how much, the tension that was going on between us at the time. And so that was really helpful too, is to separate. And that goes back to separating the business from, you have an audience and you have a task at hand. And then if we go back to the hobby thing again, because maybe this is just turning people off completely. And maybe you should be turned off completely, because if you don't really like your significant other that much, then
don't get
into starting a podcast with them. So that is something to beware of, because that could
it will be very sad if you don't like your significant other.
I know, but I think there's a lot of us that fall into that category.
Well, you just find a way to like him again, please.
Yeah, maybe the podcast would be, I don't like you anymore. Or what's
maybe
that?
The podcast can be
about
like
you
again.
reuniting. Yeah, like how to like you again. It could be called you've lost that love and feeling. Bring back that love and feeling, or something like that. And let us know. Leave a comment here. Come find us on social media and tell us how things are going. We'd like to not just talk to you about podcasting stuff, but how's life?
Yeah.
And then
Okay, now it's your turn.
Oh, okay. Well, my turn. Basically, I think your squirrel tendencies and your attention, your very small attention span can be frustrating, because I think I'm a little I am, suggestive. I can pick up on it really easily. So we'll be trying to do a single task, and then you mention 18 other tasks real quick at me. But what about this? Oh, and this. Oh, and this. Oh, and hold on this. And then something dings you or pings you on social media. And then what about this or this? And then I go down this path and so it sort of aggravates what I have going on anyway, which is just, it's hard for my brain to try to compute and put together all the different ideas
brain
you have going on. Yeah. And I can, maybe that's what it is, the male brain. And then the other thing too, is a lot of times it's interesting because a lot of those sensitivities and things that we both have, that we brought into our relationship from prior relationships and things like that, right? Like in our own insecurities. You mentioned when you were talking about the hard thing working with me is how inadequate I make you feel. I mean, even that just wording kind of shows you where that comes from. It comes from this place of allowing others to affect your emotions. I'm not getting into a place where I'm saying, oh, well, you're just being sensitive and you need to let me be a diva. No, because I want to compromise. But I'm just saying that it's just a struggle. But honestly, I don't think I would be able to do this with anybody but you. Because I just don't really like a lot of other people. I mean, I love humanity. I love everybody in the world. But, I've always been kind of a solo kind of a guy. And I've always thought I would probably be better just to have a solo podcast.
Yeah, is it because you're hard to work with, maybe?
I think it's because I'm hard to work with, yeah. And I'm an absolute recovering perfectionist, I guess you could say. Like,
something funny about us is that, so Steven, he's a night owl.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm a morning riser.
I don't even know how we do it.
So it's funny when you were saying that squirrel, like ADD, and in the mornings, he's a different person in the mornings than he is at night. Like, he has like two personalities. You want to deal with nice Steve, it's at night, and he's full of ideas, and he's going to change the world, and he has these amazing ideas around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, when I'm dying to go to bed and tired and exhausted. I can't see anymore. My contacts are bothering me. My stomach hurts.
Grumpy,
hateful. I'm just making a list of all the things that I didn't have time to do during the day, trying to put the kids to sleep.
Start threatening the kids, telling them in Spanish that you're going to rip off their arms. Which, by the way, if you're going to tell a kid that you're going to rip off their arms, if it's in Spanish, it's not bad.
No, it's not.
It's actually kind of endearing. I'm going to rip your arm. I'm going to throw you in the street and set you on fire. I'm like, wait a minute. Am I translating that right? Pretty sure she said she's going to throw him in the street and set him on fire.
Just to make sure, I wouldn't do any of those things, but it's just me vocalizing my frustration.
And I think anyone with a Latina mom probably knows. And anybody from your generation also knows about La Chancla.
La Chancla,
right?
yes,
so
La Chancla.
It's okay.
And so in the mornings, I wake up, and I usually wake up at 5:30 in the morning. And when we both get the kids ready in the mornings, and Steven just comes down the stairs, and then he has this face like he doesn't know where he is, like he doesn't know what his name or where he's at. And I've just come with this laundry list of things that he needs to accomplish. And
she basically barfs them onto me. That's where it all starts, right? But it's beautiful. And I think that as long as you're moving forward, as long as you're trying, and as long as you're communicating, and as long as you're listening. And so that's how we'll end this, is that it is about listening. It's about opening up. And the more that you can open your heart and open yourself to being willing to change and being willing to improve, the faster that you can grow your podcast, and the faster that you can grow your business, and the faster that you can improve your relationship, and have a better relationship than you've ever had with your boo, your best friend, your mom, your dad, your grandpa, your schnookums.
Yeah. And I have to say that I wouldn't be doing what I do if it wasn't for you, if it wasn't for your constant encouragement, for the way that you look at me in the eye and tell me, I'm going to cry. Give me the strength to do things that otherwise I wouldn't be able to do. Just get in front of the camera and, you tell me you can do this, and I trust you. Like when we were having our last baby, such a difficult pregnancy, and you were there in that operating room looking into my eyes and telling me you can do it.
Yeah.
And you do it. You do it for me, and I hope I'm doing it for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why this is such a good idea. If you are thinking about doing it, just do it. Yeah. Just do it and be your partner's biggest cheerleader and supporter. And you get more out of treating people with respect and cheering them on and telling them how valuable they are, how smart, how talented, than just putting them down. Yeah. Just do that.
Yeah.
Do that for others, and do that for you too.
Yeah. And do that for yourself as well. And, and give it a shot. Just try it out. The other thing that's really cool about all of this is it doesn't have to be permanent, and it can just be something that you try as a hobby and pod fade, right? Or you come back, and it's something that's really fun to try. And if you are brand new, thank you for sticking with us through this emotional. We are always just trying to just be transparent and raw and be ourselves while not doing what we tell people not to do, and that's not get too far off track. So it's about striking that balance. And here on our podcast, we try to be a little more open and loose and conversational for that reason, and we found that our listeners like that.
Yeah.
And so hopefully you found this really useful.
Yeah, we have tons of resources.
Tons
if you
of
haven't
resources,
checked
yep.
our YouTube channel, we have a bunch of videos over there about everything.
We have a freebie you can
Podcasting
download.
related.
It's podsoundschool.com/jumpstart. We've had that freebie forever. We have lots of different podcasting courses. We have once a 7-day podcast fast track, which gets you up and running in 7 days. Then if you're really serious about having a brand and a business and you really want to take your podcast places, then we have a podcast course for that. It's more of an intensive 6-week, 7-week style boot camp, which is called the Smart and Sexy Podcast Launch. Then if you want to podcast on YouTube, we got that covered with one of the world's best YouTube coaches, Nick Nimmin, actually hopped in and taught that course with us. We almost, the fact that we still look as young as we do. I mean, I know we look 10 years older than we are, but we put everything into that course. It's an amazing course too.
Yeah.
That can really help you take your content to the next level. So you can find those links right here where you're listening to this episode. And please don't be a stranger. We love to hear
Come
about you.
and say hi on social media.
If you have any ideas for content, anything you're struggling with, we very commonly will turn the questions we get from our podskis into videos and podcast episodes for you.
You can find us on pretty much every social media platform, right?
Yeah. Veronica's mostly on Instagram, and I'm mostly on Twitter. That's the easiest place to
And
get a
now
hold
we're
of
on
us.
TikTok.
And now we're starting the
Oh,
TikTok
boy.
journey. And it's been difficult. And if our relationship survives our TikTok journey, then we should win an award.
Yeah.
Because any couple who can TikTok together, they can stay together.
Yeah.
And with that, happy casting, mis amores.
Oh, mis chulos.
Thank you for crying into the microphone.
Gorditos.
You've been very emotional lately.
I know.
Is it the changing of the season? The beautiful trees?
Maybe. Yeah.
Catch you guys next time.
Bye.